Good evening and welcome to this webinar on the female game and the importance of a diverse coaching workforce. Just a really quick introduction to people on the call. Some of you may have been expecting Elena. We are hoping she is going to be here. She's just having one or two technical issues. So Elena should be with us any moment. We also have Vicky Jepson. Vicky's currently in the process of moving down south to take up a role with Tottenham Hotspur. I'm sure she'll explain that with you. So Vicky, thanks ever so much for joining us this evening. We also have Pooja Rana, and Pooja is inspirational. She's got a son on the call. Say hello to us from Leicester. And Leicester, in terms of Pooja's role, she's with the Wildcats programme at a club called G&G in Leicester. And has been accoladed for some of the work that she's done there. So welcome, Pooja, as well.
Thank you, Lee.
Bex, Rebecca and I are going to be in the background managing the chat box. If anybody wants to put anything in the chat box, you're welcome to do so. But taking us through the evening, I'm going to hand over to a colleague of mine, Joe Williams, who's going to, off you go, Joe. Over to you.
Cool, thanks Lee. Hi everybody, really great to have you all here. Just to give you a bit of a flavour of what we're going to be exploring, really it's not going to come from me at all, it's going to come from the two guests and hopefully Elaine if she appears in a little bit. But it's really around this idea of having not just more females coaching in the female game or in the game at all, but having a diverse female workforce, and that can cover age, culture, experience. There's a whole raft of different things that sit in that. So through the experiences of Pooja and Vicky, that's some of the stuff we're going to explore. Hopefully they'll share some of their experiences, which with all of these different webinars that I'm sure people have joined throughout the last 12, 15 months, this is all about taking all the little nuggets and gems of information and relating it to your own context. So some of you might be grassroots coaches, some of you might be an assistant coach in an RTC, some of you might be in adult football, some of it might be volunteer, some of it might be your day job. It's all about taking the experiences of these two ladies and just relating it to your own context and perhaps taking some of the hints and tips that they share along the way. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to kind of keep it as informal as we can. So I'll fire some questions out there and we'll just see if we can get a bit of a conversation going. But I think what might be quite good for you is maybe just to share a bit about your different backgrounds. Vicky, I'll go to you first if that's right. If you can kind of sum up probably what's been quite a long career in the different experiences that you have. If you can summarise it maybe in 3 or 4 minutes. Just give us a picture of where you've come from and where you've got to now.
Yeah, I think I can relate to every strand of the women's game from grassroots right the way up to the women's senior professional game. I started off my journey, as most people do, working in grassroots with girls' grassroots team. I spent 2 years in America where I got to experience so many hours on the grass, which is where I really learned loads. And I think being out there inspired me to see how many girls play soccer out there, which is something why I came back to the UK and wanted to try and grow the game at grassroots level. And that was very early in my coaching journey. Progressed through my coaching badges, got a role 12 years ago in the RTC. It was a centre of excellence then at Liverpool. Worked with the under-11s. I've worked with every age group through the strands at Liverpool Girls Centre of Excellence. Been an analyst for 2 years in the Women's Super League, the year we won it. And I have also worked with the international setup with the England under-17s, where we had to qualify for the Euros, play out in Lithuania against some of the top European teams. And then most recently, I was the manager of the women's team in the Women's Super League for 2 years and then in the Championship. Had 6 months out, which was fantastic for me, although it didn't seem like that when I exited the club after 12 years. In those 6 months, I had time to reflect and get my mirror out and look at the journey that I've been on in the women's game and do a lot of CPD like this, work with my mentor closely, do a lot of punditry on Sky Sports. So I've done quite a lot of that over the last 6 months. And then I've just signed a contract to now move down south to take on a role with Spurs women's team in the Women's Super League. So that's a whistle-top tour of my journey to date.
I mean, it's so varied, all the different experiences you've had. And I think the thing that stands out for me, which maybe we'll come back to a little bit later, is having worked in all those different teams and environments, you would have had a whole variety of different support teams around you as well, whether that be other coaches or just the other people that are involved. And I think that's something really that we can all relate to, irrespective of the coaching context we're in. Even if you coach on your own, there's always, a parent who perhaps brings their child along. There's other people that are in that support network. And also that idea around, we're going to talk a bit about players as well, and how we provide the best experiences we can for our individual players. And kind of from an international angle, you must have had some really interesting stories, I guess, in comparison. So we're going to come back to that a little bit later on. Pooja, over to you. Perhaps give us a bit of a background about yourself and some of your coaching and where your journey's been.
Yeah, sure. So I actually got into coaching coincidentally because I've always wanted to play since being a young child and young girl, but I think it was quite forbidden and not seen as a sport that girls would do. So I was never able to play football. So I think I'm seeing my childhood through my son. And that's how I got into it. I saw loads of female young girls coming in when their siblings are playing and just kicking a ball. So I just approached the team and, the club and said, do we not have a girls thing? How come? And they were like, we've got no one to take. I said, well, I'm here anyway, so I'll take this on. But something, it's been a fantastic 3.5 years. I will never regret taking that decision on that Friday evening at all. And I love every part of it. We started off with the Wildcat Centre. Started off well, and I'm very proud to say we have 4 teams out of that. And I have now taken the lead role in the club to promote girls and women's football because I find it's very, very important to make girls and parents, especially from the Asian background, realise that it's not something which is forbidden or should be frowned at. It's something so acceptable, and just trying to take out that stigma, to be totally honest. But yeah, I love every part of it. Being a coach, high-fiving my girls when they're coming off. It's fab. It's great. It's such a good feeling. And yeah, I'm just speechless. It's fab. Awesome.
And you can see it radiating from you as well, which I think is so great. Just for those people that maybe don't know, do you want to just explain a bit about the Wildcats and how maybe that's different to the teams that you have? Yeah,
so the Wildcat Centre is basically, it's like a non-competitive football for girls, basically who want to give it, a fair shot, first trial, and want to play with other girls at their own similar age. And I think it's really important because it helps them in all 4 aspects of, being socially active, being physical, that mental attitude as well. And also gives you the technical ability to play football. So you cover all 4 of the angles. So yes, it's basically something that Weetabix this year has sponsored. So if your children don't have Weetabix, go to the supermarket and definitely get your girls having Weetabix because it's on everywhere throughout the whole package. And it's basically just a scheme. There's there's so many centres that provide this opportunity for younger girls. It's from the age of 5 and 11. And it's just a great way for them to, I've found and I've seen, make really good friends out of that, and just love being able to do something as fun. It's not just about football, it's about what you take out of it and what your coach brings to you, more than anything. So the Wildcat Centres are basically open for, to provide that service to everyone across the UK.
I think that's really great what you say there about it being fun and somewhere for them to socialise. And Vicky, that never really changes, does it? Like, I think that maybe the fun looks different as you go through the different age groups, but that's the key element of the Wildcats program. And Vicky, like, you can probably say that's probably still true with adults and future players.
Absolutely. We play football, so play football. You've got to enjoy it. I think players aren't going to turn up to training and want to run for a brick wall if they're not enjoying it. So that's really key. I think the difference is when it comes to the elite stand, and they come from grassroots and now the more elite, especially in the women's professional game at the top, is the pressure that is dialed up due to it being more result driven. And now the platform that the women's game is now showcased on, even more so going into the new season with the Sky Sports deal, the pressure will be dialed up even more. But that's the only thing. It's still got to be fun. They've still got to enjoy it. But of course, there's a lot more pressure involved in terms of winning and performing.
Yeah, but I think it's really good. So if any of you guys, who are on this webinar, haven't looked at Wildcats, it's definitely something that I would recommend just to take that first step into girls or women's football, because it makes such a big difference to your surroundings and also to the people that live within your facility. It's something that you're providing.
That element of community and local communities, I think, is really important, and that's something we're going to come back to when we kind of delve a little bit deeper into some of those cultural differences that we experience through football. But I think Elena might be here. She can hear us, I'm hoping, even though we maybe can't see her. Elena, are you there? Tumbleweed, maybe not.
I think she was off before.
Good old technology.
Absolutely. If you can hear us at any point later on, Elaine, if you manage to just cut me off and you can just jump in whenever you like. So if we just kind of pick out a couple of bits that are similar in your stories, but you might have experienced them slightly differently. So I think just coming to part of what we wanted to explore tonight was about understanding the individual needs of the players or the participants, if it was Wildcats, for example, because that's slightly different. What are some of the ways, and either of you can jump in here, around how you've connected with individuals? And that can be when you have them face to face, and perhaps things that you've tried to do to connect with them outside of the training environment. So, when they go home and they come back.
I the first time I meet any player, I don't make the environment feel alienated at all. I'll say, hey, what's your name? My name's so-and-so, how's your day been? And just start to get to know them, because it's not about what you want, it's about what you can give to that individual or that player. So I think it's starting to make them feel comfortable that they can talk to you, they can come to you, and you're not there as a teacher. You're there as a buddy, as someone that we're going to have fun with and get something out of as well. It's knowing basically, from what type of background they come from as well in terms of community. Bring that in, have you always, do you play football at school? Do you do sports at school? It's just getting to being their age and not talking to them like you're an adult and a child. Get down to their level.
Yeah, it's making those connections, I think, is what you were saying as well. It's finding ways to either break down barriers or particularly with younger girls, make them feel comfortable perhaps in an environment that's a little bit different.
Because sometimes they'll come across as shy or not confident. So it's making sure that they feel confident in the environment that you're giving them or the setting you're giving them.
Yeah, absolutely. Elena, you're here. You made it.
I'm actually in.
You're in.
Oh my gosh. So first of all, apologies to everyone. Technology doesn't seem to favour when you actually want it to work. So I'm glad that I'm finally.
Do you maybe just want to give a bit of an intro to your coaching background, some of the experiences you have and where you've come up to, and then we'll kind of loop you into where we've got to?
Yeah, so I'm currently the head coach at Stoke City Women. I'm going into my third season with the club. Prior to that, I was assistant manager and an interim manager at Nottingham Forest. And then before that, I spent about 6 years at Derby. I worked through every single age group like possible, from like under 9s through to the 16s as well. So yeah, that's been my journey. I've done some England stuff as well, so I've just done a little bit of everything really.
Wicked. We're going to kind of unpick a few of those different experiences, try and link them into some of the topics that we're talking about. So kind of at the minute, what we're talking about is those individual differences of players and perhaps some of the considerations you have to make. And that can be, you know, different age groups, the different clubs that you've had. And Vicky, like, what some of your experience have been about how you make those connections and really try and find ways of individualising your coaching and how you plan?
I think, well, previously in my most recent role at Liverpool, when I come to recruit a player, that's really key because that's my first interaction with them. It may be at grassroots when you're assigning a player and they're new to your session. You've got to be approachable, and it's all about that chemistry session and trying to find out as much as you can about them without being invasive and being on their terms. So I always want to know what their purpose is. What are your goals? It's different for me in elite women's game than it is at grassroots, but still at grassroots, somebody may want to turn up to a grassroots session because they just like the social aspect of it. Some of them want to go there because they have an ambition of going and playing at the local centre of excellence and are using it as a stepping stone. Or some of them may just be going because the dad loves football and wants a daughter to play. So I think understanding the purpose of that individual is really important. And that's at any strand, even at the top elite women's game. It doesn't really matter. And I think my conversations will always start with that. When I'm looking to sign a player, I want to know what type of person they are. And I also want to know what their purpose is and what they want to achieve. And then that can help me help them form their individual development plans to reach their goals.
Did you ever find that maybe kind of around that kind of like the young teenage girl, sometimes do they not know the answer to that question though? If you say like, what's your purpose? What do you want to achieve? Do you ever find that they're a bit unsure and you have to guide them?
I think if it's a youth player who's trying to impress me to get in the first team, they'll play you a little bit of lip service and say what they think you want to hear. When you put them in a group and give them some flip chart paper and say, I want you to, you come up with what your goals are. It may be as a unit. So the defenders are there, the midfielders are there, and the forwards. That's when the powerful conversations happen, and it's player led. It's so much powerful, and you empower them to put down on paper what actually they want to achieve, whether that's as a collective or whether that's as individuals. I think that's when you get the real truth from youth players. Senior players, not so much, because they'll tell you how it is when you're in a one-to-one conversation. But with youth players, it's so much more rewarding when you give them the ownership on what they want to get out of football.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because as coaches, ultimately, we're there for the players. Yeah. Whether that's, I have colleagues and friends who are coaches at RTCs or adult clubs, but they also coach Wildcats. Well, they're very different, and it's all about the expectations of the players, because if they weren't there, then we wouldn't have anything to coach. So I think that's a really interesting point. And Pooja, how does that kind of relate to perhaps some of the cultural challenges you faced in and around Leicester, because it's so diverse there?
It is, definitely. So I think I have actually come across situations where parents actually prioritise, they've got two siblings, got a son and a daughter, but then they'll prioritise their son over their daughter. Oh, my son is playing a league game. Well, yes, so was your daughter. There's set up, your mum and dad. So why not split, or why not ask someone for, nearby, or to drive it home, pick your child up. It's more the stigma in terms of Asian females are not seen to be playing football. It's not a norm. That's not what they've done. They don't see that as a norm. We all laughed when Bendy like Beckham came out. But it's such a reality. Why would you want to stop any child's dream or passion to do something, regardless of what sport it is? We actually have no right to do that. You need to let your child explore what they really want to do in life, regardless of whether they become footballers or regardless of whether they don't want to do it afterwards. At least they've tried it. So I think that's the big thing, is getting parents and even girls. They'll come in and they'll like stand in a corner and they're not too sure, and they'll be like, "Oh, I've never kicked a ball." It's like, it's fine, it's okay. We're not here to kick a ball. It's fine. We're just so many other different things. It's not just about kicking a ball. So I think it is breaking that barrier in terms of it's acceptable. You can say to your parents, or you can say, "Oh, I've played football at school." If I was ever to have said that, it was frowned at. I used to hide from my parents to play football when I was younger.
It's so much has changed in such a short space of time. And I know that, Elena, you've had some experiences when you were doing some of the work at the community trust at Derby, working with different, because again, it's such a diverse area, working with perhaps different schools or children from different faiths and cultures. How does that relate to some of the experiences you've had in identifying and relating to players based on some of their backgrounds?
I think it's just really important for people to embrace but have an understanding. So, what's that person, what have they been through to get to football? Because it might help understand why they might behave in a certain way, why there might be, some support or the choices or different things like that. But just really be open, but be willing to learn. I think that's really important. If you don't know something, ask the question or find out. For example, like if it's around the food element and preparation and stuff, ask the questions of why do we have certain foods before a game, or what does match prep look like for us? What does game prep and training prep in terms of our diet look like? Just ask the questions, be inquisitive. If you don't know, find out or do a bit of research. So there's just so much to being culturally aware and diverse than just seeing race and gender and accepting that into your environment. There's lots more than that. It's understanding the differences of where people are from and in the world, their religion, how that affects their life and how it might affect their training attendance, their school, the importance, the weekend and the planning. And just, I think for me, it's just understanding it, but being appreciative and ultimately just, I don't know how to put this, but saying it's okay. Like, if you need to miss a training session, don't worry, it's all right. There's too many clubs that just say you have to be here every training session, and if you're not here, then you're not committed. Sometimes it goes a bit beyond that. So I've probably given you like a really long-winded answer to it, because it's not that simple. But
no, it's not long-winded at all. It's a different perspective. And you mentioned about earlier. You said you'd been on the mentor program with the mentoring program with the FA, and you've done some work in some of the international teams and seen maybe some elements of what we call multidisciplinary things, where you've got your coaches, you've got your strength and conditioning, there's the psychologists, and I think it's about as well is that if perhaps people are on the call and they actually coach in a team of people, I think I'm interested in how because you each in your own environments have a team of people you work with. Pooja, I know you've got a team of coaches. Elena, you will have had experience with different groups of people, and same with Vicky. How do you work as a team to make sure that everybody is inclusive of all the differences you've got? How do you do that? Because it can't just be one person doing it by themselves.
No, I think you've got to have the communication with the players. For example, I can use like a camp scenario, and I say the food probably wouldn't be the food that I'd eat on a weekly basis. So is that going to best prepare me for the game? Is it going to fuel me right for the training session? Although it's nutritional wise, it's probably ticking the right boxes, but for my body, I'd have those types of foods probably once or twice a week, and then my diet would be consistent in different things, and you still get the nutritional element, but understanding that that's part of me. So I want to bring that version to the camp, but at the same time, it needs to be done properly as well. It's not just putting it on, like doing it. So I think there has to be a whole education around culture, around food, around how that affects the preparation for players. We just assume that everybody eats the same type of foods, and we don't, because there's so many different parts of the world that people are from and base themselves in England.
It's really
again
interesting.
another long-winded answer.
No, because I think when you run events, or you send out the form, you can say to people, right, are there any allergies or something like that? And that's really the only question we ask. We don't. Well, I've not seen it. The question asked around, are there are there any cultural foods that you're using? What is your normal weekly habit? Because I think that's so important that there isn't just one way to be nutritious and healthy. There's so many ways that you can do it, particularly for those players who are perhaps on that kind of performance pathway. And also, I think there's an element in there around players perhaps don't want to ask, or they don't know to ask. And we have a duty as coaches to say it's okay to ask for that.
They probably shy away, don't they? They're not, I wouldn't say they're confident, but they just shy away from not asking, just in case they get things, or they feel that the question that they're asking is inappropriate or to be something laughed at. And I think more than anything else, it's about respecting everyone's culture, everyone's difference. No one's the same. But everyone is there to support one another. It's a big, large football community. Mm-hmm. Your race, your creed, what colour you are, whether you're disabled, none of that should matter.
And how have you built up the team that you have, Pooja? Because you started off from one Wildcats. So is it 4 teams? I think you've got now.
Oh, yes, so we've got 4 teams,
and you've got a team of coaches as well, some male, some female. How have you kind of tried to build that group of that workforce to help us out of your
basically, so we've had coaches that have probably had nieces or daughters that have played. So we'll ask them, do you want to be part of that team? If not, we've had a lot of parents who've turned around and shown a bit of interest. I'd like to know more about football. And you try to, understand, are they there for the long run? Because there's no point having a coach for a couple of weeks and then they decide that they don't want to support us. So it's about knowing what their purpose is. As Vicky said, same as players. What is your purpose? What do you want to get out of this? Are you there for the players, or are you just there for a badge? Because the badge means nothing without having that and giving your coaching experience to your players 110%.
I think that's so important, isn't it? Showing that you're there for them and that it's not just even though it might be the day job, perhaps something, Vicky, in your role, it's become your job. But even if it's not, it's that, every day is about the players, and it's not like, you can deliver a practice or a game or a session. You might deliver it 100 times, but you don't want the players to feel like that. They need to feel like it's the first time they're seeing it from you. And Vicky, how is your kind of experiences of the different, again, like the teams of coaches you've worked with? Because there's a whole range there. What would you say are some of the most cohesive teams of coaches you've worked with? Again, thinking back to this element of understanding individual players and appreciating cultural differences amongst groups.
I think it all stems from the leader and how the leader leads the group of people. The culture is led by people, but ultimately, as a manager, I was accountable for how my team, the team behind the team, operated. I'm very player-centred, and I want to know my players. I had an open door policy, and that's great. But if another member of staff didn't think that way or act that way, then that's when the culture is broken down. So it was really important that we had regular MDT meetings with the sports scientists, with the medical team, with my psychologist. And it was really important that I was making it clear in how I wanted us to treat the players and go about our day-to-day communications with the players, having that open dialogue with them, having that understanding and being player-centred in our approach. I think that's really important because as managers, we can't do it all on our own, and everybody has to be a part of that common goal and that culture. So that was really, really key. I haven't always got it right because there's been past when I was a younger manager, and I've tried to do it all on my own, and other people may have had other thoughts and feelings around how they coach or how they speak to players. So it's been a learning curve on my journey. Certainly working with a big MDT team at England and in the senior women's professional game is where I've probably learned the most, that if I want to operate my environment in a certain way for players, it has to be all or nothing. And the one thing, it doesn't matter, every single one of us are different. We have different backgrounds, different ages, different experiences. But the one thing we all have in common is a love for this sport, for football, and that's why we're all on this call. I think you can't move away from that. But also, I need them to work this way to make sure it's my culture that we're driving. And it's important that you empower staff to be that way, but let them know your vision. And that doesn't have to be at elite game. That's the same in grassroots clubs when you're working with the volunteer coaches. This is how I want us all to communicate with players. Want the open, and no question's a stupid question from a player. They should feel comfortable and safe in our environment to ask questions, and that's where the learning really does take place, because we're not mind readers. We don't know what they're thinking.
And that's so important for female players in particular. If we, because there is a difference between the male game and the female game. It's the same sport, but it's played differently. There are different strengths to the game. There are different nuances to the game. And that's not just in this country, that's in different countries. The American game, soccer, is played differently than it's played over here. The rules might be the same, but they have different ways of doing things. And what would you say to people who are on their own? Because, at some point, all of us will have been that one person coaching by themselves. So if I'm that coach and I want to, try and build a culture within my team, or maybe the two teams that I have, how do I do that? Because I don't have, an S&C coach. I don't have a sports psychologist. It's just me, a bag of balls, and I'm on the grass pitch.
I think we think as the adults that we are the ones that are in charge of everything, but actually players love responsibility to be in charge of things. It's so important, even with the youth teams that I've worked with, youth internationals, youth centre of excellence players, whatever, they love to be empowered. And I rotate a leadership group. So 1 month I'd have 4 players that would be in a leadership group, and they would be in charge of communicating back to me any issues or communicating it to the group, or even presenting to the group on their thoughts from the weekend. But I'd pick a different set of players each month, and it's good because you get to help people come out of the shell and speak publicly, because everybody in every team, there'll be someone that would want to sit back and be quiet. You also get to learn the different learners that you have in your group. And it's good to empower them and actually drive them forwards to drive your culture. In the senior environment, obviously we have captains, vice captains, but I still had a leadership group then. And it was really powerful for me because as a manager, I don't live in the changing rooms. When they're getting ready to go out onto the grass, if there's any mood hoovers in the changing rooms, my leadership group would stamp out any of that so that they would come out onto the grass ready to perform every day in that full-time professional environment. So it doesn't matter what age you are. Leadership groups, I think, are so powerful. But just be careful that you don't just pick the same ones for the full season, because others can feel a little bit left out. So it's how can you make it inclusive for all and empower people to have a little bit of responsibility, because if you're the only person in charge, it can be quite draining, but let people feel a little bit accountable for the team's common goal.
I can see you nodding along with that, Pooja. Do you have some experience of how you've done that maybe in your own teams in Wildcats?
Yeah, so basically, even when we have any games, I never have the same captain. And I always I'll say to you, okay, even if it's just internal between my team, I'll say, okay, split yourself into 2 teams, and then I'll see, and I'll see how do they choose their players? What are they choosing their players on? Is it just ability? But it's so nice to see that I have a mixture of the group. So I've got some strivers, and I've got some people who are in between, and the strivers never, until now, have just chosen the best team that they can kick ass. They'll say, no, they help each other. They inspire each other. And that's such a big thing for me, just to see them giving that extra bit of help to someone who doesn't understand something properly, or they're there as a role model. And that's what you are. Every single coach on whether it's you're playing for England or you're playing for Leicester or you're playing just in a grassroots club, you are a role model to the people that you are training. So you as a coach, as a volunteer, need to be exceptional in all aspects of not only delivery, but it's the way how you talk to them, as Vicky said, as Elena said, dietary stuff. People might not know. I'm a vegetarian, so it doesn't mean just because if you eat meat that you're going to be lean and you're going to be able to, play cricket or football to your best ability. So it's just having that finer balance, but more than anything, it's about having that respect for each and every person on the pitch, regardless of whatever situation they come from, whatever background they're coming from.
I think that there's two really important things in there. It's this element of role modelling, and that's something we haven't really talked about yet, but we're going to. And also, like you say, about that social connection, which is such an important part of the game, whether it's the female game or the male game. It's not just the playing, particularly in those first experiences in grassroots football. That social element is so key, because that is where they develop those skills that take them into these elite environments, if that's where they want to go. Are they going to be the mood hoover that when they're 20 years old in the dressing room, or actually do they still love and have fond memories of their Wildcats experiences? And Wildcats is a relatively new scheme, and perhaps we'll start to see that, in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe there's players who have gone through Wildcats and have these fond memories that they can share. Just kind of moving on to that bit about role models. Elena, this probably might be a hard one to answer, but I'm going to chuck it to you anyway. If you think maybe you can answer one of my 3 questions, so I'll give you a bit of a lifeline. But I guess one of them is, what do you see as the level of importance of role models for female players, across, different cultures, say? Do you have you had any role models, in that way that have inspired you? And what would you say to coaches to be that role model? So there's 3 things in there. I'll let you pick which one you want to go with.
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I think I can kind of answer all of them and try and give you the briefest version possible. Role models are so important. I think looking back at my early childhood experiences of football and joining my first football team, the manager was female. Now, she didn't do anything. She literally sorted out the kit and everything. But just having her in and around the changing room was massive for all of us, because we felt like she was the mother of a team and we'd go talk to her. Her husband was actually the coach, but I didn't realise how important it was just having her around. She didn't coach or anything, but she called herself the manager, and if we had problems, we would go to her. And looking back now, that was absolutely crucial for the team. And as a team, we were a good team. We had a variety of types of people in there. It's probably, in terms of like diversity, it was the most diverse team I played for, and I was 12 years old. And it's just a shame that Derby couldn't continue at City to continue that. But then, if I look at the best experience I've had in terms of role model wasn't related to football, because I originally come from a martial arts background, but that belief that she instilled in me that I could do it and I could be like her if I tried really hard, because she was, represented England, represented Great Britain, and the conversations that we had, and the training and the style and the belief, and just saying that if you do this, you can be like me. And I was like, I want to be like you. And I don't think she realised how much of an impact, but the conversations you have with players, because like Pooja says, they look up to you. So they remember all the conversations that you've had, even when you forget about it. So make sure you leave them with something that they're going to remember you by, and it's not the worst conversation possible. That's the last one that they're going to remember. Mm-hmm. Those connections are absolutely vital, and they'll remember them in the future. Like, I'm 30 years old now, and I remember from when I was 14 and the confidence that she instilled in me that I could beat anyone. I
think what I love about that story is the fact that she wasn't really maybe perhaps a traditional footballer. You know, he was perhaps doing a lot of the background work that is so important to any team, you know, kit, all the secretarial work, all that sort of stuff. And I think, you know, for people that are here, and certainly from my own experiences, as coaches, we don't need to be precious. And I think, Vicky, you kind of said it, you can't do everything. We don't need to be precious over the fact that actually I might not be not the right role model, but I might not be the only one who can be a role model. And I could find that person in other areas. They don't have to be the best football player, but actually sometimes and I don't mean to say it's simple, but something as straightforward as they look like the girls that are in the team. That can be so inspiring to young girls to see somebody who could help influence them in that way. And I think that's really the thing I love about that. And as coaches, we can perhaps be a little bit more open-minded as to who we bring into our club. You know, I know that somebody was telling me, particularly in the boys' academy, they kind of, a lot of them are going the way of, you'll have a lead coach who's got a lot of the football knowledge and maybe have an assistant who's a teacher, because they're bringing lots of educational pedagogy to the way that they do things. And I think my question for you, Vicky, off the back of that is, when you build your team of coaches, you know, the staff and support staff you have around you, what are some of the things that, you know, the differences you look for? Do you have somebody in your team where you go, actually, they don't really know as much about football as somebody else, but they bring this? How do you go about building that team of people to help you?
I think it's important that you have a variety of ages. So you've got the young, modern coaches, but you've also got some of the older experiences that have been and lived the game from when its heritage was, you know, when the women's game used to be, it was never professional in those days, and they've been through it. I think having that is really important. I used to see, through my coaching journey, I've always been the only female through every coaching qualification. Even on my A license, there was 36 guys. I was the only female on the course. It's only just changed now. And actually, when I was at Liverpool, I had quite a big backroom staff of a lot of females, and it's gone too far the other way. So I do think it's important to have a mixture of males, females, ages. Definitely. I think also they don't always have to be from football, their background. So when I was at England, we had someone from British Cycling that came across in the physical performance department. And you can gain so much from other sports. And I think that's what's great. And sometimes we get stuck in, what do they know about football? They're from volleyball or they're from British Cycling. But actually, there's so much that you can learn from other sports, which has been quite useful for me in my journey so far. So I think that you just can't rule out. I personally like to employ people that are better than me. I know leaders that like it the other way around because they feel a little bit feared of people being better than them. But if I have a team of staff that are absolutely excellent around me, it's going to make my job easy. And the key skill to being a manager, a coach, a leader is to delegate to those people in those areas, because we don't do it enough. We've got to trust and empower and delegate. It's absolutely vital we do that, especially if you've got such an excellent backroom staff, or I call it a team behind the team.
Mm-hmm. Elena, I can see you smiling at that one. I feel there's a story in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think like Vicky just said, is having people that are better than you, but also that complement your weaknesses. Mm-hmm. So I know my weaknesses, and I'm not saying happy with them, but if that's somebody's strength, that's brilliant, because, you know, it means I can really, really focus on my actual strengths, and it just complements the team. So when you are bringing them together, think about what you're missing, what you need, who can give that, and all those different elements, and trust each other, but don't be afraid to challenge. So as a manager, I'd like to think that I'm not precious about it's always my way. It's you know, I know everything, and no, because I need some innovation, I need some creativity, I need different people to bring that to the table, because if not, we're just going to get the same results. And when it gets tough, who's going to be the one to step up, throw something on the table and say, let's try this, and then hopefully it works? And if you haven't got that type of environment, it will only be you thinking, and ultimately you might not solve the problem on your own.
Or it may be the wrong decision.
Yeah, there's that.
But it's the other thing as well, that even the coaches around you, like, even though it's a women's and girls game, two of my teams have both male coaches, and it's just making sure that they gel with the girls. You know, I've had an incident where, you know, we've had a male coach and who's also coached a boys team, and that transition for them was hard because couldn't differentiate between, you know, you'd shout at a boy, you know, oh, what you're doing. Well, you can't do that to a girl. The girl just looks at you and think, what are you saying to me? That could break someone's confidence. So it's knowing how and when to say things as well as coaches. But yeah, it's all about, you know, I take the mick out of some of my players, and the players will do the same to me. I get called Pocahontas. But it's just having, you know, it's just making sure that you're there for them, and showing them that there's nothing that they can't talk to you about.
Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that you've got that, you know, that fun relationship with the girls that you have is because you've taken the time to do the bits around getting to know them, getting to understand each other. They know you, they know them. Then you build this really healthy environment, and that's when, you know, that's in grassroots. It's the same thing when you get to adult football, you know, in the elite environments and recreation. You know, you end up in that place because you've done all the hard work in the background.
It's always fun, you know. Football's always fun, but I always say to them, as you get through the ages, you know, when you're under 6 and comparing to under 6 to under 12, you know, when you're an under 12, you're a bit more serious. You're focused on where you want to be. You want to win, you know. You want to show that you're really good, and you want to be able to feel vibrant and inspired. So it's knowing that, having that discipline. And I think, you know, something I've seen my team go from under 8s all the way to under 12s at the moment, and the discipline change in them is amazing.
And keeping the same team in that way, you have to be adaptable with them, don't you, as a coach? Because the needs and the individual differences that they perhaps had at under 8s, they've changed, some of them. And now they're getting into moody teenager territory, and that's a totally different ballgame. And probably a webinar for a totally different night, because I think we could talk for hours about that. And I know, Lee, you're in the background. You've been keeping an eye on the chat. I've not been looking at all because I've just been chatting to you through, which has been great. Lee, have you got a couple of questions you want to chip in?
Yes, I can. Bear with me for 1 second while I just pick them on the screen. There's some relevance to what you've been speaking about. The first one I'll ask you is, David, Anthony and Adrian, I believe obviously all males, are interested in some of the differences in coaching female players compared to male players. If you've had those experiences, would you coach them differently in terms of male, female players? And then added to that is a question around, is there any benefit to females playing in boys' teams, or do you think it should always be girls with girls in terms of their development?
I don't mind going firstly.
Yeah,
I've just had 6 months out from the women's game, and I spent some time working at a lads academy. The difference, I don't think there should be a difference in your approach when you're coaching. Doesn't matter the gender. I think you've got to be authentic. So Vicky Jepson will not look different if I'm on a pitch demanding from lads as if I'm demanding from women. What I will find different is the ball move quicker. They'll cover more ground. The XL, D cells, all these things, the scientifics behind it will go up another level in the with working with the guys than it will with the girls. But I won't change. So I will still motivate the players in the same. I'll still demand the same. My interventions will be the same. I'll still give them ownership and hold them accountable the same. So for me, nothing will change. I think knowing the personnel that you're working with and what is achievable within your session planning, that might change, because I'm not going to ask the female centre half to make a 25-yard diag that's not achievable and they can't do, yet a male under 18 can do that no problem, effortlessly. So I think the session design may change, but in terms of me as a coach, I think it's so important that you don't change and you're authentic, and you can adapt and improve on areas that you think, actually, this is my blind spot. I need to be aware of these things when I'm communicating with people and leading people. But for me, my character will not change whoever I'm working with, male or female.
Anybody? Elena, do you want to your experiences from the age? I think it was 14, wasn't it, when you started coaching at Derby County?
Yeah, I started at 14, and I don't know, I'm still in the game, and I'm getting more grey hairs, that's for sure. Mine's a little bit different to Vicky's, because I was a teacher as well. I felt I showed different elements of myself at different moments, just based on what that group of players needed at that time. It is similar to Vicky's in terms of you need to remain authentic, but I was like, what parts of my personality will best suit this group? So with the boys, they would love the banter, and it would be quite that type of atmosphere. With the girls, maybe they just don't find me funny, I don't know. I try it and nobody laughs. So maybe so I just parked that one a little bit because I thought no one's laughing, so let's stop with that. So I just show different parts of my personality, but that's just based on the players and the environment, because I'd like to think that I'm a slightly different coach now to what I was at Forest, but that's all because of the environment. At Forest, I couldn't control that, so I couldn't be as authentic as I wanted. At Stoke, I work with people that allow me to express myself, be myself, and the players accept that. So it's who you are and what you bring also depends on what your club allows you to do sometimes, and it does kind of restrain you a little bit, but just try and, I think one of the things I do is now I'm in a fortunate position where I would only go into certain environments to coach, because if I can't be authentic, there's no point me being there.
Pooja, from your perspective, I guess your son and your daughter are interacting with them around football?
Well, so I actually have daughters.
Sorry, you'd have two, but I knew that. I don't know why I've said son and daughter.
But one of the questions that you asked is, should girls train with boys? I'll give you a classic example. Two of my girls in two different teams play for boys' teams at the moment. I never felt I needed to hold them back just because they were girls, that they had to be in that girls' setting. Why? Why can they not play with boys? You know, what is? Yeah, a girl can play football just like the way our lads do, and they love it. They love it. You know, so I don't think you should restrict. I think it was a question that someone asked in the chat. Don't restrict girls to just playing with girls only. You know, if they want to try it, let them go out and try it. Let them go and play with the lads. You know, because to be totally honest, that will probably build their confidence, and they will see how once they come out of their own box, playing with lads, yeah, they're going to get kicked around and pushed around, but that makes them stronger.
Yeah, great. And there's another one. You spoke about role models earlier, and I think sometimes you don't realise the power that you have in providing others with role models. So this is really aimed at Vicky. Jazz has asked a question. Jazz, if that's you up in Birmingham, I hope you're well and nice to hear from you. But Jazz has you gave an opportunity to a footballer in his club, Simran Jamat.
Yeah.
At Sporting Kelsa, and actually is a role model now for future generations. Do you just want to explain that story? And I think it's also something for Vicky to say that you're providing opportunities for people who are role models. Maybe just explain the story behind that and the opportunity there.
Yeah, Simran was from Walsall. I worked with Simran in the England under-17 squad. We went on a journey. We were in a Euro qualifiers. We qualified. We went to Lithuania. We finished fourth in Europe. She was very much a part of that. I signed her for my under-21s at Liverpool. And when I got promoted into the manager's position, I brought her up to train in the first team environment. I never, ever look at a player that they're different. They're just a football player. I'll understand the difference of them, but I never treat anybody differently in terms of opportunities. Nothing will ever hold them back. If they can show me that they have a little bit of a wow factor or a super strength, I want to ignite that super strength and bring that out of them. And Simran certainly had a lot of super strengths that gave me those wow factor moments in games. So we were playing Yeovil away in the Women's Super League, and I picked up the phone to Dad and said, I want to take Simran with us. It's a big opportunity for her, but we had an injury and I'd like to bring her with us to sit on the bench for the experience. And I brought her on in that game to give her debut. And I think it was a massive turning point for her and her family, but also is great for the next generation to look up to Simran as a role model, to say that it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is. If you really work hard and you sacrifice these things, that you can get there. And I think certainly when I was young, and I don't know for others on this call, but I didn't really have a role model to look up to, because the women's game wasn't in the spotlight at all. The only thing that I had was Mia Hamm, and that was in the States. Like, in terms of female coaches, there was only Hope Powell that I knew. So I didn't really have anybody to inspire to. But our younger players now, certainly coming through the pathway, are certainly role models to the next generation of Wildcat players that are now turning up weekly in a fun grassroots environment. So it is important that the youth players as well, just like Simran, realise that the power that they have as role models to others that want to be the next Simran or whoever it may be.
Brilliant. There's some other questions. You've just spoken about Mia Hamm and the USA, and I think Joe alluded to America earlier on. There's Leah, who is an American who's been in the UK in grassroots for 9 years. She's asked a brilliant question, and she was alluding to the barriers that have been broken down with entry to football by the Wildcats program, but has a concern around the drop-off rates at kind of, say, 13, 14 years old. Any thoughts on that, ideas around engagement with 13, 14-year-old players that you have? I guess I'll start with Elena. I'll put you on the spot. I'll give you a second. I'll keep talking, Elena, so you can think as I'm talking. But in terms of dropouts, 13, 14-year-olds, and I'll come to you in a second, but I'll also bring in Bex in a moment, because she wants to talk about something around the teenage brain. So we'll go to Elena, and then I'm going to bring Bex in to talk about that.
I was one of them players. I dropped out at 15 and I didn't get back into the game at 18. Now, one of the reasons why I dropped out is because I felt like I was investing a lot of time to get very little back. So you'd get kicked off the pitches, you'd have like hand-me-down kicks. And I thought, what's the point in this? I could go back to martial arts and get treated better. So one, think about your environment. Is it somewhere where the girls want to come back? And a massive factor with females, I think personally, is the social element. Players will stay with the team because they absolutely love the girls, and they will socialise with them, particularly at the standard that I'm in. It's starting to change slightly. I wouldn't say for the better either. But they're best friends. They spend time together in the week, at the weekend. And if you can get that, and you can get the environment right and hook them in, you'll keep them in. As soon as they start to find other interests, because they're not bothered about meeting up with their friends at football because they're not really friends, they just enjoy the sport. It has to be more than just football. That's for me. And I think back to why I dropped out. That was another reason. The friendship started to not be there as much as what they were before. So I thought, I'm not going to waste my time, and I dropped out.
And Pooja, your thoughts on that? Obviously working with a grassroots team up in Leicester.
I think what Elena said is the team having that bond is very crucial. I've seen people come and go during the 3.5 years that we've been doing it, even in terms of per team. Perfect example within my team, I'd probably say I've probably lost 4 of my players, but it's I feel proud and privileged that I've been able to entice and inspire the girls who are currently with me, who started off with me at the start. And it gives me the satisfaction that, I'm doing something right somewhere. So it's just making sure that they do have, my girls come in and I have to stop them. I have to break up and say, hey, we're only here for an hour. Stop talking. You can talk afterwards. Or, oh, this is what happened at school today. And it's like, put your phones away. Get on with it. But it's just, it's lovely to see that banter as well with them. But yeah, as Elena said, it definitely needs to be just more than, oh, we're going to play football today, or I'm going to see them again on Sunday. It's just having that outer connection with them as well.
Brilliant. And I'm conscious of time. It's almost 9 o'clock. There's one more question. And for this one, I'm looking to utilize your coaching expertise. So Abdullah has asked the question, and let me just read it out. It says, how would you develop an individual player but coach a successful team? So how would you develop an individual player but coach a successful team? Opportunity for you to tell us all about your coaching knowledge around developing individuals and players. Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I don't mind going first.
Go on, yeah,
I've been on a 3-hour meeting this morning with Spurs around our individual development plans for senior players. Even though they're senior players and you think they've got it all, no one's a finished article, there's still things you can work on. More so with youth players, obviously, especially when you're working with 8 to 10-year-olds, that window of opportunity of really getting them embedded in things that they can improve on, right foot, left foot, whatever it may be. I think it's so for us, how we do it is we're in a full-time environment, so we're fortunate. But when I was speaking to you before about knowing what your player's purpose is, when you sit down and you ask players, what do you think you need to be better at? Normally, 9 times out of 10, they'll say the same thing that you're thinking, and that's going to give them ownership and empower them to actually want to go and work on those individual goals. So it may be, at grassroots level, it may be, do you know what? I just want to be the top goal scorer, Vicky. Okay, then. So you want to be a top goal scorer. How do you think we can get there? Well, I need to be able to shoot with both feet. Right. Okay, then. So this is what we're going to do, and kind of guide them through it. It's obviously different at senior level, because I don't speak like that with senior women that are paid to play. But they're the kind of things that you have to have. And then with those individual development plans, when you're designing your session, you may have 7 players that all need to work on their passing and receiving skills. Well, then you incorporate that into your session plan, and you can do that in fun games or more stripped back where it's unopposed and it's just passing it around a passing pattern. But it's really important to, what do they need to achieve as individuals? Can we incorporate that into the session to get that outcome? And then also, how do we even check that they're improving on those goals? Because that's the next bit. So in our environment, we have video analysis, so it's really easy. Our analyst will pull out the individual clips. But for you guys, it may be that you delegate tasks to your assistant or other players to have ownership on. I actually think I'm doing better at my finishing, Vicky, because I've scored this amount of goals, or I've hit the target this amount of times today. So I think making sure they're on board with the goal, their individual development plan. You've got a plan in place on how you're going to get better, and that comes from you and the player. It may be that they practice in their garden. It may be you incorporate it in your session. And the next one is, how do you check that they're actually improving it to set more goals? I think that's really important. But that's the process that I would go down with youth players, and obviously slightly different approach with senior players, because we have a bigger support team to manage and monitor that.
Good stuff. There's a question coming in the chat box around when should you start thinking about those things. Pooja, is that something that you do with your girls in the Wildcats program, support them individually as well as collectively? So you do it from a young age?
I do, yeah. I don't feel that there should be any age that you need to start as soon as you see the person needs that extra, or even then, everyone's different. So for example, if I have someone that's not good at shooting but really wants to score a goal, I will get my top goal scorer or someone who's really good at that to pair up with them and then do an exercise or drill with them. So rather than it come from me, it comes from their own aged person. And that has such a big impact, because it's not coming from a coach. It's coming from one of their colleagues or one of their teammates.
Great idea. Elena?
Oh, God.
Developing individual players within the context of a team. And any advice?
Yeah, I think in terms of the age, if they get reports at school from as young as 4, I don't see why they can't have something similar within a football environment. Obviously, school ones are really wordy and nobody really reads them, so keep it really simple. And it's the conversations that you have, because in order for me to develop a player, I need to know what they're thinking and where they're at. So until I have that conversation and I'm like, they don't get it, like they don't understand, and that can't help them, because until it clicks for them, it's not impossible, but it makes my job harder. As soon as you have that conversation, because the first part of learning is the understanding. They can't get no application until they understand the process of what that looks like, and then I can help them with how it's applied, when it's applied, the time it's applied, and all those elements. And if I get that right with everybody, with all my players, the team will be successful. That's how I see it. And if I get it wrong, or I just let somebody coast through, there's going to be moments when they can't, and then they're going to get found out. So it's just really important to have the blend, but the first and most important is the understanding, particularly with the younger age groups. Don't worry too much about the application. Can they see the pictures? Do they know the pictures? Do they really know what to do? Then it's can they demonstrate it? And then it's can they apply it a little bit as well? And then the more consistent they are, the more likely they're to win and progress and maybe get promoted or something. I don't know.
Brilliant. No, I think there's been some fantastic messages around participation and developing, sustaining participation, developing players, but also then coming on to the performance and winning football matches as well. So I've enjoyed listening. I'm going to pass back over to Joe, because I'm conscious that it's 6 minutes past. Vicky, I actually got a chance to go and put the light switch on in the room that I'm in when I was off camera.
No,
and I can see it's getting a bit darker, and I'm conscious the wife's probably paused Love Island because she wants me to watch it with her as well. So I'm going to go back over to Joe to wrap things up. But I just wanted to say thank you, all three of you again.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks, Lee. And I think just to kind of summarise that last point you were all making, and it sits across all the different contexts that the three of you are in, and that hopefully relates to everybody that's listening, is to be patient with that learning. So with the individual plans, whether that's grassroots or whether they're in an RTC or they're in an under 23s. First of all, there's only so much a young person can take in at one time. With everything else that they're going through, bodies changing, they're getting a little bit older, things are happening in their own lives. And to be patient, that from my own experience, sometimes you can't overload the players that you have, and that's irrespective of their age. I think that's still the same with adults. It's just my opinion on it. But to just have that patience, that they understand to be patient and to focus on one thing at a time. I go, right, I'm going to work on this here. I'm going to get this absolutely spotted, and then I'm going to move on. And certainly from my experience, when you throw too much, I've certainly learned the hard way that they start to go down that kind of learning dip, and they lose that fun that we've all been talking about tonight. So just for me to kind of wrap things up, I've really enjoyed listening to all your different stories. I could keep going with these sorts of things till about 10 o'clock, but I think we might lose a few people along the way. I think just the last 30 seconds from each of you, and I might time it, I don't know. What would be the one thing that you would want people who have attended tonight? What's the one thing you would say to them to take away to help enhance their coaching practice around, creating a diverse workforce, inspiring individuals? What would be the one thing that you would tell them to take away to perhaps change in their coaching practice?
I'd say if you are the coach of your team, you are not solely responsible for leading every session. Empower others and encourage others to be leaders too, to drive your culture and make it that enjoyable learning experience every time they come.
Wicked. Pooja?
I'd probably say put yourself into the shoes of your player. See it from their point of view and see it from their vision, and you'll be a really good and successful coach that way.
Excellent, thank you. And Elena, no pressure.
God, I'll leave with a bit of analogy, really. Inclusive, we talk, and difference, we talk about inviting them to the party. The real step is asking them whether they want to dance and whether you're going to really embrace those differences and create the right environment for each individual.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for giving up your time and for sharing your experiences. Good luck with whatever kind of your next step is. I know, Vicky, you got that exciting move down south. I'll see you soon. Don't worry, it's nice and sunny down here. You'll be fine. Pooja, I'm really looking forward to seeing where your Wildcats and your girls team develops, because your 4 teams, give it another couple of years, you might be double that size. You know,
Well, I've got a 3-year strategy, and I'm dedicated fully towards it.
That's really cool. And Layla, again, thank you for joining us. You made it. The technology didn't defeat you. But it's been really great to talk to you, and I hope that everybody on the call's really enjoyed hearing the experiences. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. I hope so, in a future webinar. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.